Recording stopped. Yeah, we've got a quorum. Make sure I have the drafts up.
Oh,
Oops.
you have to set it to record.
Play. Oh, there we go.
Recording in progress.
Cool. Did it. I didn't know that was a thing. All right, great. Welcome everyone to the October 30th, 2023 meeting of the Rules Committee. I grab this agenda. I have that on my computer. All right, thank you. Okay. We're going to call the meeting to order. Secretary Ms. Wimberly is not here, so I will call the roll. Karen Austin, Keisha Brown, Rebecca Chasson,
Here.
Katie Doty,
Here.
Donna Wimberly, Emily D'Angelo,
Here.
and I am Evan Badron, Chairman, and I am here. 4 members present at a quorum. All right. First order of business is to adopt the agenda. Anyone has any corrections or additions to the agenda?
Where it says new business submission by committee members, do I need to tell you now what I would like?
Yes.
There. I would like reporting disciplinary action taken by another jurisdiction within so many days considered.
Okay, reporting disciplinary action by another
jurisdiction.
Okay. All right, so Ms. D'Angelo has made a motion to amend the agenda to add a section, an item 9A, reporting disciplinary action by another jurisdiction within a time frame. Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Dr. Chasson. Any public comment on this motion? Remember for public comment for this meeting, you can use the raise hand feature. You will be recognized and allowed to address the committee for 2 minutes. I will pause to see if anyone would like to offer public comment on the motion to amend the agenda. Seeing none, the public comment period is now closed. Is there any objection to adoption of that amendment? Any objection? Hearing no objection, the amendment is adopted. Now we need a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. The motion by Ms. D'Angelo, second by Dr. Chasson. Any public comments? Seeing no public comment, the comment period is now closed. Any objection? Hearing no objection, the motion is adopted. The agenda is adopted. I need more sleep. Okay. So, item 4, matters recommitted from the board, none. Item 5, matters for final report to the board, none. Item 6, matters with drafts for review. We will start with 6A, procedures for BACS designation. Now, this is a lot, and I also just finished it this morning. Apologies, I intended on finishing it last weekend, but the United States Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals decided it did not want to give me the extension I requested, so my week last week was a little different than I intended it to be. So, anyways, it's not important. This is also a public recording. I'm not complaining. But so anyways, this is what we will do here first. I'm going to make sure that everybody gets a chance to read through this, but I will also, for the benefit of the public, I will put this draft up online and I will go through and discuss each new section. In order for us to get kind of a holistic understanding of the proposed changes. After we have that initial explanation, we'll go through and discuss individual portions, and then we can receive comments. We can discuss potential changes, what we think is good, what we think is not good. Let me put the draft up first so that everyone joining us can see. We have 34 attendees. Thank you all for joining us today. All right, everyone should, here we go. You should be able to see. So the genesis of this item was that the board has seen recently multiple instances of supervisees who are being penalized, who are losing supervision credit, who are losing work credit because of actions that the supervisor failed to do, or something that the supervisor did not do that the supervisor is supposed to know what they're supposed to do. And then we reviewed the rule about BACS and realized that it was very limited. It did not really account for a lot of the situations that the board has been seeing, and did not really provide for the kind of accountability that the board thought was necessary. And so the committee has been tasked with updating and formalizing some of these BACS procedures. So let me start by saying 503, which is the first one that's listed in here. There are no changes to 503 with the exception of removing K and moving it to 507. Okay, the reason is because 503 sort of describes more of the process for the LMSW seeking the LCSW credential, and subsection K dealt with the responsibilities of the BACS. And since we're sort of making section 507 more directed specifically toward the BACS, I just moved that into there. So that's why 503 is included, just so that you'll see that I moved something. Otherwise, it's just relettered and everything's fine. Let's get to the important stuff. All right, so 507A is new. 507A provides some introductory kind of definition and the scope of the duty of a BACS. The board-approved clinical supervisor, or BACS, is a designation that an LCSW may obtain by fulfilling certain board. We want to make sure we use designate or confusing a designation with a credential. A BACS is not a credential, it's a designation. A credential is, for example, LCSW, RSW. Okay. BACS have primary duties and responsibilities to each supervisee under their supervision and to the general public, which duties and responsibilities must be maintained at all times. And then we identify the duties. Section 1 is sort of a restatement of what was in previous 503K, but expanded a little bit to account for some of the things that the board has been seeing recently. 1, BACS have a professional duty to each supervisee under the BACS supervision. This duty includes, without limitation, A, to honor their commitment to supervise responsibly, which includes covering content as indicated in the supervision contract. B, to maintain accurate records. There should be a semicolon here. Oops, changes. C, to accurately and completely, advise supervisees of the requirements of supervision. That's embarrassing. D, to complete and submit all supervision forms timely. E, to work cooperatively with supervisees to arrange supervision sessions mutually convenient to the BACS and the supervisee, with the understanding that the supervisee's interests should always come first, and the BACS should make themselves available to the supervisee for required sessions and other consultations. F, to remain informed on social work best practices to assist the supervisee's professional development. G, to maintain the best interests of the supervisee unless those interests conflict with another duty or responsibility described in this section. And H, to refrain from charging an unreasonable fee for the supervision. So let's go through each of these individually. Honoring the commitment and subsection A is from the original 503K. You'll see up here in the green, which is what was deleted. That was moved from K and then incorporated into the individual ones under there. Maintain accurate records is the same. Accurately and completely advise supervisees of the requirements of supervision. That goes along with some of the trouble that we've been seeing of supervisees not having or submitting supervision contracts, verification of employments, et cetera, on time. It makes sure that the BACS is required to tell them and assist them as it relates to those forms that are going to be filled out. E is a continuation of something that previously appeared in 503F, but kind of expanded a little bit. And the reason is because the board has been seeing a lot of instances where supervisees are requesting waivers of the in-person supervision. And a lot of the reasons have been that, oh, my supervisor will not do X. I have to account for what my supervisor's schedule is. And so that the 503 E essentially says that the supervisor has to work with the supervisee as well. But since the supervisee is the one that's receiving the supervision, the supervisee needs to make sure that they are receiving the kind of consideration to make it easier for them to be able to schedule. F, to remain informed on social work best practices to assist the supervisee's professional development. That's new, but it's sort of a general catch-all as it relates to professional development things. G is also sort of a general catch-all to make sure that the supervisee's best interests are being preserved, but also with the understanding that the supervisee's interests do not come before the public interest that I have addressed in 2. And then H is new, refrain from charging an unreasonable fee for supervision. This is sort of me putting my attorney hat on because, lawyers, for example, are prohibited from charging an unreasonable fee.
It's unreasonable.
Well, that's the thing, right? So unreasonable could mean a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. For attorneys, obviously, there's a whole lot of interpretation as to what constitutes reasonable and unreasonable. I understand that this is a committee and this is a board that likes additional definition. And so why I put unreasonable as a placeholder for additional discussion as to what we wanted, if anything, to include for that part. It may be the committee and the board's decision that we don't want to include that. But for now, this is something I put in so that we could discuss it. Mm-hmm. So that's 1. That's the duties to the supervisee. The duties to the public are indicated in 2. BACS have a professional duty to protect the general public by ensuring that unqualified social workers do not attain the LCSW credential. This duty includes, without limitation, A, to accurately and candidly, to accurately and candidly evaluate each supervisee for fitness to practice. B, to refuse to recommend or advance a supervisee that BACS deems unfit to practice. C, to provide accurate and truthful information to the board about each supervisee, including their professional development and any personal circumstances bearing upon the supervisee's fitness to practice. And D, to report to the board when a supervisee engages in conduct the BACS reasonably believes may violate the law or this part. The part is all of the rules, yes. Or that calls the supervisee's fitness to practice social work into question. That is sort of an identification of the BACS in their role as a creation of the board to sort of be not the gatekeeper, but to assist the board in determining what LMSWs are fit to become LCSWs. B, this is additional prohibitions that kind of don't fit into the other ones, and it just really relates to providing truthful information to the board. A BACS shall not, A, provide incorrect, incomplete, or misleading information to the board in an effort to circumvent any law or this part. B, counsel any supervisee to provide incorrect, incomplete, or misleading information to the board in an effort to circumvent any law or this part. Or C, maintain a relationship with a supervisee that would violate the Practice Act or Chapter 1 of this part. That is just making sure that that BACS understand that they're required to provide accurate information, just to make sure that, people aren't providing untruthful information to try to get waivers and things like that. Mm-hmm. All right, C, yeah, I know this is a lot. Mm-hmm. And then we'll go back through each one individually, I promise. C, to qualify for the BACS designation, a social worker must complete all the following requirements. These requirements must be met before the social worker receives the BACS designation. That has changed only because you see number 6 down here. I moved this up into the preamble of that clause because it makes more sense to have it there. And then C is just a cleanup. So none of that has changed other than changing, for example, licensee to social worker, and removing 6. And then D, to maintain the BACS designation in good standing, the social worker must. This is mostly a cleanup, except this is going to cause a lot of discussion, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. 4, supervise at least one supervisee every 3 years. Mm-hmm. I figured
Highlight that immediately.
I figured there would be stuff to say about that.
That was right there, circle.
Yeah. All right, so E, if the board receives it, this is all new. This is expanding on the sort of bare bones procedures that exists right now in the rules for considering and removing a BACS designation. And this is all to make sure that BACS are provided due process and are received the kind of notification and hearing that's required before removing a designation. Technically, because it's a designation and not a credential, there's really not any requirement, it's my understanding, to give the same kind of due process you would give through a credential, like through a compliance hearing. But we tried to essentially do the same thing to make sure that people are getting the kind of due process that they need. So E, if the board receives information that a BACS has violated a provision of this section, the board may order the BACS to appear before the board for a hearing to determine whether the BACS may retain their BACS designation. It's kind of wordy. 1, the BACS has the burden to prove compliance with this section and may present documentary evidence through affidavits, court records, official records, letters, or other papers or things, along with sworn testimony to establish such compliance. That part is taken right out of compliance hearing. It's the same thing. 2, if the board finds that the BACS has violated any portion of this section, the board may remove the social worker's BACS designation. The board may also require the social worker to take remedial measures to correct any consequences occasioned by loss of their designation and may impose conditions upon reinstatement of the designation. The board may also permanently bar a social worker from receiving the BACS designation. That's all new.
Yeah.
For what does it say for? Anyways, F. If a social worker loses their BACS designation for any reason, they must cease supervising all supervisees and must assist those supervisees to find alternate supervision. This alternate supervision stuff is new. Everything else is, well, the ceasing to supervise is the same. The board may impose additional penalties if the social worker fails to take reasonable efforts to assist supervisees in securing alternate supervision occasioned by the social worker's loss of the BACS designation. The social worker who loses the BACS designation must also refund any unearned fees to all supervisees. That's all new. G, to reinstate a BACS designation, the social worker must, this is all the same with the exception of 3, complete all conditions required by the board for reinstatement, which is the same thing for reinstatement of a credential. Now, that was a lot, okay? So what we'll do is we'll go back up to the beginning. I'm seeing some comments in the chat. Remember that we do not, the comments in the chat are not read out loud, but they are public record. So I do see a couple of comments. Somebody mentioned a typographical error in 507 2E. Means refuse to recommend or advance a supervisor to BACS deems. Well, it's a tense issue, but I think it's probably correct the way that it's written. All right, so we can do this one of 2 ways. We can go by section and receive public comment on individual sections. We can receive public comment generally. I think it's up to y'all as to how y'all want to do this. If anybody has any preference. I already do have.
Section is good. Yeah.
Let's do section by section. Great. Okay, so this is what we'll do. We'll go ahead and start with 507A. Now, 507A is a big section. This identifies the duties that the duties that BACS will have towards their supervisees and toward the public generally. Mm-hmm. So let's open up now for public comments on this section. I'm going to pause just for a second to make sure that everyone who wants to speak can get their hands raised. All right, so I have one hand raised at this time from Jennifer Hannon, who is now recognized.
Hey, everybody, can you hear me?
And Jennifer, good to hear from you.
Thank you. I think a lot of this section looks good. And so my comments are about a couple of letters. C, I'm a little bit concerned about advising supervisees of the requirements of supervision, because I do think that while you want the supervisor to be doing that, it's also falls on the shoulders of the supervisee to educate themselves as well. And I don't know how you might want to put that in language somewhere, but I could, when I read these, I try to think about, okay, what could be the bad stuff that comes out of it, right? And so one of the things that gives me pause with C is that there could be a supervisee that says that the supervisor didn't tell them that they had to come to sessions on time, or something like that. And so it really opens up supervisors to a lot of possible petty complaints. And so I'm just a little concerned about the broadness of that language on C.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think that's actually a very good point, because the last thing that we want to do is kind of absolve supervisees from their requirements of knowing the rules. We sort of charge all social workers with knowing the rules and understanding what the rules are. So I do appreciate that comment. I think we can probably, once we start getting to talking about the language, we can probably make some amendments to account for that. But I appreciate your comment. Thank you, Jennifer.
And I have a couple other ones if you want to hear the rest for this section under number 1. Do you want?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, happy to do that.
Under the same section D, I know that the supervisors certainly need to complete the supervision forms and submit the supervision forms in a timely fashion. Is this, and so I would just want to make sure that this is referencing the forms that only the supervisor needs to be turning in, because there are supervisee forms too that need to be submitted. And so I want to make sure that's clear from this, because there's some stuff that the supervisee needs to do too. And so I think maybe spelling out what those forms might be, even if it's just simply in parentheses. So that's the thought for D. Did you want to comment on that before I go on to E?
No, I want you to know that your comments are very helpful, so you can keep going.
Okay, and the last one for this particular section is E, to work cooperatively with the supervisees to arrange supervision sessions that are mutually convenient. So I think on the surface that sounds great. My concern is this. I'll give you an example. So one of the things that I did when I was a supervisor, when I worked at Our Lady of the Lake, is I drove to my supervisees' homes and provided supervision in their homes, wherever they wanted the supervision, as long as we had a confidential setting. And so I drove to them. And then at some point, when I was working for another mental health center, I had my kiddo and needed people to drive to me because I couldn't drive for a while. But I was still able to provide the supervision. They just didn't want me driving yet. So anyway, it was tough because I was supervising 3 people at the time, and nobody wanted to come to my house. It was a problem, and so I really had to address it. So I'm a little bit concerned about this, and I'm wondering if there is a way to say that at the beginning of the supervision agreement, the supervisor and supervisee need to mutually agree to terms about where they're going to meet, and that so that it's spelled out at the beginning, because what's convenient can change, and what people think is convenient can change, and so I'm just a little concerned that E gives too much elbow room again for somebody to complain about a supervisor.
Yeah, I definitely understand, Jennifer. Thank you. Do you have any others on this section?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your comments, Jennifer. We will now move to Nita Balcom. You are recognized.
Hi, how y'all doing? And thanks for recognizing me. Tagging along with what Jennifer was saying, one, the accurately and to complete and submit all submission forms timely. I had entered in the chat that the way it's currently set up, CertaMe, the LMSW has to initiate the request to begin those. And I see a lot of concerns that are raised in the community that I work in where LMSWs aren't submitting that request, especially things like the supervision evaluation for whatever reason. Maybe they've gone on and don't need, are not interested in getting their licensure anymore. That one came up most recently. And so that becomes an issue when the system is set up such that the supervisor can't really initiate those things. And then the other, tagging along with Jennifer, the item E, with returning to pre-COVID, which my personal belief is that we cannot return to pre-COVID. Pre-COVID doesn't exist. But at any rate, with returning to an expectation of in-person sessions, the convenience and the access has been so greatly diminished that it becomes almost, it really is an obstacle to working cooperatively and mutually convenient. So those are my two comments of that section.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you for your comments as always. Next, I will recognize Gina Rossi. Oops, clicked the wrong button. There we go. Gina Rossi, you're recognized.
Thank you, and I appreciate all the work that you've put into this. Obviously, I can see that you've done a lot of work. Jennifer set the tone, how probably many of the BACS, experienced BACS, feel about some of this. Obviously, we know our responsibility to advise supervisees of the requirements of supervision and turning forms in timely, obviously. The problem I have with that is the board's choice of the platform that creates a lot of confusion and problems for people trying to, or knowing if the form has gone in, did it go in on time? Here's the issue. When we have an external supervisor and there's an internal supervisor who has to sign off, many instances of the internal supervisor, the person who's not the BACS clinician supervisor, not understanding if the form went through or how it went, and that's due to the platform that we all recognize is not clear, it's a poor choice, and it's not worked. And to put this on the BACS, on the BACS, literally the back of BACS is unfair. You all know that it's not working right, that platform does not work. And so now to ding the BACS, who are working as hard as they can to get everything on time, and having to work with, the supervisee and their supervisor, it's really, it's unacceptable. That this is something that you have to fix first. The next thing I want to address is the cooperation with the supervisee to arrange for supervision times. Obviously, anybody that takes on a supervisee is going to work out a time that is good for both of them. There are some BACS who are specialized and their time is limited and it's precious. And if supervisee wants that time, they should be able to have it. I really feel like E is related to the board's getting all these overwhelming requests for waivers to the in-person. You all, I think, were very surprised by that. The community needs it. The whole country is going that way. How can you dismiss that just because you, Evan, doesn't feel like it needs to be that way? The rest of the social work community feels like it needs. Most of the social work community feels like that needs to be an option. And so I'm concerned about how you're going to use E, when you get these waivers, that people need that option. And like Anita said, we're not going back pre-COVID, that's dinosaur era now. So let's get real with that. I have another concern about, about the cost. Where is that? What is, I forget the term, where I'm missing it here. The cost that it be, unreasonable. Who determines if it's reasonable or unreasonable? Some social workers charge their flat rate for what they charge for their session, or a private practice session. In the social work world now, we are encouraging people to get paid their worth. And if you have a private practice client and you're charging $150, and by the way, that's not me. And if you that hour, if you choose to use that hour as this is my slot, you really want my time, I do a lot of work, I do a lot of background to prepare for your supervision, this is my charge. I don't want somebody on the board making that decision unless it's pretty clear cut. Obviously, like somebody out in the rural area decides that they're going to charge $300 an hour, that's different. But I'm concerned about how this could be subjective. I think that's it for right now. I want to appreciate everybody who is speaking up. There's been a lot of talk about this. We are very concerned about it. And this decision may not be made today. So I want everybody to think about it clearly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rossi, and I always appreciate the shout out. So let's see. Next, I have Will Francis, who is now recognized.
Yes, thank you. This is Will Francis from the National Association of Social Workers, Louisiana chapter. I'm not going to be long because I think the speakers before me have done an excellent job of really raising where a lot of the concerns are. Jennifer really started it, it was continued through, and Gina really picked it up. I think my larger sort of point is that I've always been a proponent that the rules themselves should describe the relationship the place fits in and not the relationship itself. And I think a lot of what I'm hearing are concerns here in this specific section about, say, something that should be more convenient to the supervisee. That raises the question of if the supervisor has 3 kids and says, I can't meet you but this time, and the supervisee says that's not okay, and then the complaint comes, and then that starts taking up time, that it stresses the idea that sort of what should be lifted up should come from the direct relationship itself versus describing again the space where that is, similar to the to the piece on the fees. So I worry that this section of the rules, in trying to sort of get into the weeds of all the particulars that can arise, is maybe then creating more challenges for those particulars or things that lie outside of it. So my own recommendation would be to maybe pull up a little bit and to remove some of the language that's really about that very specific space in the relationship, and create those larger rules that allows the relationship to really foster and flourish, and allows, again, the BACS supervisor themselves and the supervisee to really do the work to find the best way that they can set up the supervision, and sort of, instead of putting all these expectations for that before that relationship has been established. But again, I know this is hard work, and I thank you all for doing it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Francis. So Jennifer has her hand raised once more, but let me let everyone speak once before I let anybody speak again. So next I'm gonna recognize Danita LeBlanc.
Okay. Basically, I just wanted to ditto what Gina and Jennifer and Nita have already said, as well as what Will said. And I am particularly concerned about the unreasonable fee and who determines that. Thank you.
All right, and next I have Lashika Shine, who's recognized.
Yes, sir. I wanted to know specifically who worked on completing this document and these amendments with you. Just because my concern is that a social work perspective should be included in the drafting of this proposal. So that's what I wanted to know, if there was anyone in addition to you that created this revision.
That's why we have this hearing. Okay,
Right.
Thank you very much. All right, Jennifer, you are back up.
Thank you, Evan. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I really do like Will's point about not wanting the language to be too prescriptive about how the social worker, supervisor, and supervisee negotiate their terms. I do think that's important. I also appreciate the point about the fees that Gina made, noting that certainly egregious cases would be obvious. But I remember when I was doing my supervision, I had two different supervisors, and one of them charged her full price for a session. And this was in the late 1990s. You know, I was making $22,000 and paying $100 for each hour of supervision. That was a whole lot. And at the same time, that was what she charged her clients, and I was taking up a therapy session. And so I could appreciate that. I didn't like it at all, but I certainly could appreciate that. So I think we would want the language to be more clear. If we're going to have that, like no more than what's charged for a therapy session, or, regular or something like that. But I'm worried about the term unreasonable being so open to interpretation between among supervisees, because it may be that it's not reasonable for one supervisee, but perfectly reasonable for another. And so there's a whole lot of interpretation there. And then back to someone else, it might have been Gina Lewis's point about I think Gina Lewis spoke, but about the supervision and the convenience, oh no, it was Gina Rossi. For right now, I offer supervision in my workplace, and I offer it free. But I offer it to LDH employees. And so if LDH wants to, if my employer wants to help their social workers get toward achieve licensure, then I'll provide that supervision free of charge. But I'm going to do it on LDH's work time. And so that's what I'm willing to do right now because of my obligations at home with kiddos and stuff like that after hours. So my terms have changed. And so I would imagine I'm not unusual and that lots of folks do that too. So I certainly wouldn't want someone to come in and say, hey, well, she's not being reasonable because I want supervision from her, but I want it on Tuesday evenings at 6 because that's what's convenient for me, because I wouldn't be able to do that. And so it still brings me back to the terms of this is the supervisee and the supervisor should be able to negotiate that at the beginning of that supervision relationship. And so that's my last thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, so I don't have any additional hands raised on this section. I will pause just a second to see if anyone else would like to submit a public comment, because after that, we're going to close public comments on this section. All right, so I don't see any more public comments, so the public comment period is now closed. Let's start.
All right.
General discussion.
Oh, man.
One thing I just wanted to say is there are responsibilities for the LMSWs too, and I feel like that's going to be what's addressed in 503. Mm-hmm. And we do have a supervision committee. They haven't started meeting yet, but their focus will be on 503. Mm-hmm. LMSW seeking the LCSW credential. So I think some of those points that were made were really good points. Mm-hmm. And, we need to make note of that to provide to that committee, right, so they can consider it when they're working to rework 503. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for example, I definitely think, we can't have C put the entire onus on the supervisor to make sure that the supervisee knows what the things are. We can't, put the duty on the supervisor to have the supervisee read the rules. I mean, that's what the rules are there for. So yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I also agree with the thing about the forms. If it's the supervisor to submit the forms, if their role exclusively to submit the form,
Right.
yes.
Yes.
If it's a collaborative effort or if it's a supervisee
There
form,
aren't
then
any, I think there's just maybe one or two that a BACS would have to submit on, and still, it still needs to still have some supervisee input involved.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very few that we would do on our own
Mhm.
versus supervisee.
Right. I know we just had so many compliance hearings that had to do with like forms that weren't provided, and it's always.
I don't know if that's more of like a timeliness issue of the supervisee versus a certainty issue.
Mhm.
So I don't think it's almost fair to, because was that really a big issue before certainty?
Yes.
Okay, so it must be something else.
I mean, granted, look, it's definitely increased due to the problems with certainty, but
Would
no.
you say like on a scale of 1 to 10, if it was like absolutely horrible, 10, and then 1 be like perfect, what was it before certainty?
It was a good bit of people, we could, I could go through the minutes.
Yeah.
But, of people that didn't turn things in within the 60-day time frame. And when credit was denied, they asked for a compliance hearing. So that was not uncommon for
Yeah,
us to get that.
okay, but you said it's increased
But
pretty
it's definitely increased since starting, which is why we're leaving.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Hopefully soon.
Well, then it doesn't seem like this rule would technically change that really regardless. It just seems like it would. Because I still don't even, because I remember paper, and I still don't remember, it was still more on the supervisee to turn in all that stuff. It wasn't so much coming from the BACS. We were turning in our signed stuff from the BACS. We were putting in an envelope and had to turn in all that stuff. Even the learning plan, the BACS, we would have to fill it and turn it into the board. I don't remember what the BACS had to do. I know it's been a few years since I had it, but I don't remember the BACS having to turn anything individually to the board on their own.
I think there's a concern for that when the complaint is about the technology infrastructure. So I think that, to me, it sounds like it's a legitimate complaint, only because, I know when I have to use technology and it fails, and I don't have the time to go back the next day or, then it could really mean that the person is submitting this a lot later because they don't really have the time built in to
Follow up continuously to make
yeah.
sure that it's being submitted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the infrastructure is not working. I think that's a very legitimate complaint and concern by the BACS people, the supervisors. And Emily, I know you just mentioned that there's a plan to change that particular company to
Yeah, the way the submissions, it will be different.
Okay, so
The whole platform is different.
okay.
But to get back to your question, Katie, it's been an ongoing discussion as to whose responsibility it should be. And I think one iteration of the rules had said that the supervising and supervisor had joint responsibility. And then some people's thoughts were, well, it's the LCSW BACS is the one that has to go through the training. They're the ones that are getting taught like what is required and when it's required. And so it kind of shifted more towards
That BACS training doesn't go through the forms.
it's the board orientation workshop that does,
Okay.
not the 6.5-hour workshop.
Okay.
So we want to make sure, we want to try to stop what we've been seeing so much of, which is the forms that aren't coming in. And I think we recognize that there's a responsibility both on the supervisee and the BACS. And so the question is, how do we reflect that accurately without being unfair to either party?
Right.
That's a tough question.
I think things that are strictly for BACS, that needs to be submitted timely, and that could be, and I think if the person who said, if we laid out which forms those were, and then there should be a different statement for that 503 that says, well, this is what the forms are who's responsible for these forms. Because yes, I think like termination of supervision, I've had that issue when, getting a new supervisee and someone hasn't completed their termination eval and we can't get in the system, you can't start a new thing. So those kind of things need to be definitely completed on time.
Mhm.
And, but it needs to really explicitly say what forms those are. So there's no confusion of who is responsible for what.
If the supervisor hasn't submitted their forms in time,
Right.
doesn't that impacts the BACS? And further, the BACS could say in this other section, this person is not appropriate to the profession, right? If the
It goes that far, yeah.
supervisee consistently refuses is not compliant and sending it in. So it is a joint responsibility, it appears. But I think clarifying which forms and not penalizing the BACS if they submit what they're supposed to submit. If the supervisee doesn't submit what they're
They're not
supposed
following
to,
us.
Right,
Yeah.
it's not the responsibility, but it can lead to, I
Yeah.
would think, a person saying,
Reporting it, like that's an
Yeah.
issue.
I'm
Yeah.
charging X number of dollars for this supervision, this person's not submitting. I can't supervise them anymore.
Because then that would lead us on a out of compliance. If after 60 days, the board hadn't approved everything, then we're not approved to even do the supervision technically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you supervise? How does a first time meeting look like? Like, do you guys typically talk about what has to be done and when it has to be done?
Yeah, we definitely, and we also go over it together usually. So like the learning plan and all that stuff, we're going over it together. We're talking about it. And, some of those things that they're submitting, like their HR department has to complete, how many hours they work there and all. So sometimes it falls on their actual job supervisor or their HR department or, what have you. So, but for the most part, informed consent, we do that. We do an agreement and all that stuff. So
That's workplace supervision.
no, I
Workplace-
do it in my practice.
So private.
Mhm. No, workplace supervision is a whole nother.
Yeah.
So is it feasible to list out the forms now? Is that something we can do?
If we know it, do you know?
No,
I know, I just remember there just being one that I was able to do on my own without the supervisee having to. But I think everything else, the supervisee has to invite
The
you.
way it's set up now, the supervisee has to invite the supervisor to fill out the form.
Inserting me, right?
Insert me.
Okay.
We can tell by a date when the invitation was sent
Mm-hmm.
to the supervisor.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, so let's see. Because that's gonna change with the new platform, so we need a rule that can accommodate all of the eventualities and changes. Okay, so what if, let's see. So I think, let's just kind of go through what we agreed on. So we agree that C is, it takes away the responsibility of the supervisee to understand what's going on. So it sounds like C can maybe even be deleted.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do y'all think about that?
I think there needs to be some kind of informed consent going on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that doesn't mean rules technically or requirements, but I think to enter in a relationship like that, you need some informed consent. But just to save yourself too.
Mm-hmm. So well, what if we put like a caveat though? Like what if we say to accurately and completely advise supervisees of the parameters and requirements of supervision. However, the supervisee is responsible for
knowing the laws and
something like that.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Or maybe it could be a requirement to the supervision relationship or something, and then
You can't just do that.
What is it?
I still go back to the fact that it's the BACS that's trained and the LMSW is a brand new LMSW.
Mhm.
And they don't go. and
What
read the
rules are we
rules.
worried about here? What is it that we're trying to protect?
To know what forms have to be filled out and at what point.
Yeah.
Okay, so C is pretty much going into D.
Not really. It sounds like C, the BACS, is responsible to provide knowledge about the regulations, the requirements. And so you provide knowledge, but it doesn't mean you're providing skills to the supervisee to complete or do what they need to do. So it's mainly accurately, I don't know if I put completely in there.
Yeah,
But
completely.
accurately, you know, and there may be forms that say refer to, you know,
Oh, yeah, like, here
LMSW,
is this,
you know, given the documents so they
where you can find it.
understand it. And so it's up to that person, that supervisee, to understand it and respond to it in the relationship if they're seeking out supervision. I mean, they know why they're seeking out supervision, so it's their responsibility to, the supervisee's responsibility once that information is provided. So I understand, you know, what you're saying, Emily, about the BACS and what BACS is supposed to do. But I don't think this completely, you know, it's just to accurately provide knowledge about the supervision process, you know, for LMSWs to LCSWs. I don't know, and then.
So I think it sounds like we can keep it as long as we provide a caveat that it doesn't remove the duty of the supervisee to know and understand the rules and the laws that relates to supervision, or is that not where we're going?
I think that sounds good. I think that captures that it's not all on the BACS to have every single rule read and rehearsed and know every little.
And Emily, you said there's something else on the LMSW's responsibility when they're seeking the LCS.
Well, I think we need to take these comments of what they were saying about LMSWs need to also educate themselves. And we need to put that into 503.
Yeah, they need to ask, yes. Okay.
And maybe we could even say like C503.
Yeah, for the role of the supervisor.
Yeah.
The role and responsibility of the supervisee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think I have something y'all will like. Okay, so C I have changed, and this is what my proposal is. C, to accurately and completely advise supervisees of the requirements of supervision. However, this does not diminish or eliminate the supervisee's duty to know and understand the role and responsibilities of the supervisee identified in the rules and law governing supervision.
I don't like the completely part.
Okay.
I think accuracy is important.
Yeah.
You know, but it still is the supervisee's responsibility to, if it's given to them accurately.
Mm-hmm. That I like that. That makes sense. I can remove and completely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Will you read it one more time?
of course. C, to accurately advise supervisees of the requirements of supervision. However, this does not diminish or eliminate the supervisee's duty to know and understand the role and responsibilities of the supervisee identified in the rules and law governing supervision. Okay, so then we get back to D, which is forms.
That's when we need to specify,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So I'm just gonna specify which the forms that are due.
Yeah.
Okay, that might, so the BACS is not penalized.
Exactly. 'Cause
Mhm.
Right, I don't right.
I think it might be just a couple that the BACS has to do on their.
Okay, so it would be nice if we could do it without like specifically naming forms, just in case the forms change.
Oh, sure.
That's why I'm thinking like to complete and submit all supervision forms,
Required.
like that the BACS is charged with. Like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to say it correctly.
Requiring the BACS to, well, no, requiring. The BACS is,
Yeah.
All the designated supervisor forms, right?
Oh, that's a good way of
Yeah,
saying it.
Okay,
Yeah.
BACS designated.
To complete and submit all BACS designated supervision forms.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Great. All right, y'all. Okay, so and E, I understand that a lot, and I think Jennifer's suggestion was actually an elegant solution in that you sort of establish the relationship and the parameters at the beginning. So maybe instead we say to work cooperatively with supervisees to arrange supervision sessions mutually convenient to the BACS and the supervisee. And something like at the first supervision meeting. I mean, it's not great language, but yeah, like have it set forth at the beginning.
Yeah,
You
and then
know.
any changes are agreed upon going
Yeah,
forward.
yeah.
But I also want it to be some kind of understanding that if it doesn't work out, it isn't upon the BACS to change their schedule to meet the supervisee's need. It's more like maybe you need to get another supervisor.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So let's see. How do we fix this?
Right. I mean, the supervisor could get a new job.
Yeah. That's
And
right.
they're not available anymore
Yeah.
at that time.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's just, yeah, that's not.
This one also, commenting on a couple of our people in the community about the virtual option, because I know we discussed that a little bit at the last meeting. And that should this section include something about that option, or should that be in another section? That I don't know if they're going to be certain criteria, because we were talking about, the amount of time at the board meetings that the approval for virtual supervision is taking place. And it seems like it's time consuming. And we did talk about some criteria or whatever, so that it's not bogging, keeping the board meetings full of discussion about who gets approved and who doesn't. So
Why is it a rule? Why is it a rule that virtual supervision isn't taking place anymore? I understand that we're going pre-COVID, but with the rest of it seems like it's just causing more trouble than not.
Since the rule's not since the rule is there,
Yeah. How are the other states changing it then?
but
Doing this?
yeah,
So we could do this first and then?
having rules promulgation, yeah.
Oh, okay. So we need to
So
do
we
that.
kind of got like a pass when all of the craziness with COVID was going on and all the shutdowns. And the state being under a declared state of emergency.
Yeah.
But then once that's lifted and
So the other
Kinda
states just
can't-
maybe got ahead of it maybe, and they were like, well, let's just hurry up and do this before the COVID restrictions come up.
they may have, or they may not have had requirements.
Oh,
You know, they
okay.
may have already had
That in place.
allowances for
Yeah.
virtual supervision.
That makes sense, because even doing clinical sessions, like I'm doing therapy, it's virtual has always been allowed. It's just that we never really used it until COVID days, I guess. And now it's just more, I just feel like it would eliminate a lot of these issues.
So pre-COVID, we did have requests
Yeah,
based on this rule. There wasn't a lot.
yeah.
It was like more military
Mhm.
situations.
Well, I mean, like even the whole unreasonable, she made a very interesting point where she's like, well, there could be a social worker in a rural area. She's only a social worker, so she's going to charge probably a big amount because she's in high demand. And again, that would eliminate some of that issue because of competition. You know, we wouldn't have to worry about unreasonable because you couldn't charge those kind of rates because you can get it from anyone around. So it just seems like a lot of these issues are stemming from this virtual supervision issue. And we're trying to make up for those issues, yet we're just causing more issues.
Well, I think too that, right now we're saying virtual therapy, but teletherapy has been around for more than 20 years. And I remember teletherapy being evaluated 25 years ago. So it's sort of come late to Louisiana maybe, and unless people did therapy with people in other states.
I did virtual
in other states
before COVID, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just saying that this house supervision as that would be an option, and maybe when this is applied for, when the BACS and the supervisor turns in the application, that they could designate, and maybe there are some other criteria, because I think last night I looked up something about other places, with virtual supervision, and it is happening other places and very effectively.
I just don't want to cause any more inconveniences, any more issues with getting more social workers out there. I mean, it sounds like that's just what it's causing.
Yeah.
We're about to lose supervisors, and we're about to lose a lot of people wanting to do this.
Right, we are going to lose a lot of supervisors.
So we don't need that. So I'm wondering what is really getting in the way, and why can't we just go ahead and get with the 21st century or whatever century this is and figure out how to eliminate these barriers? It's just strange. Why don't we just, I don't see unless there's a big argument against it, or I'm not understanding why we can't be like the other states.
So the board has not authorized this committee yet to promulgate that rule, I think.
Oh, okay.
So what happened was, and there was a lot of, I always appreciate an opportunity to explain this because right around the time there was a lot of misinformation. So it's like Emily said, it is in our rules existing, 503, what is it, H? I feel like I know it by heart now. 503H is what we're constantly considering, which is the old rule, which was, you have to do it in person unless you have extenuating circumstances. The board did not vote to amend that or to instruct this committee to amend it.
So we can't even, but we're making a lot of rules because of that.
Right. So what the board did charge the committee with is providing, which is, according to my notes, is what Donna is working on now, provide a further definition of extenuating circumstances in 503H. So we have to essentially continue along this path until the board directs us to promulgate a rule allowing for
Can we do some sort of recommendation or ask the board if we can go ahead and talk about that, or what does that look like?
So I think it would be appropriate to make a request from this committee to make a request to the board to consider the issue again. It could go on the next meeting agenda. But yeah, we can't initiate it, but we can, I guess, always ask the board to look at it.
Because I'm wondering how much time would you guys be saving when we don't have to talk about the waivers?
The waivers take up a lot of the meeting, that's for sure.
Yeah. It just seems like a lot of hours for what?
Yeah.
What is the point? It just kind of seems we're being a little prideful at that point. So I'm just confused as to, I'm confused as to why it's even a thing.
But I disagree that 507 doesn't need revisions,
Oh, no, I never said it doesn't need revisions. I'm saying a lot of the issues from 507, it seems like it's trying to make up for the issues that are caused by only doing in person unless there's an extenuating circumstances, especially this unreasonable fee. I think that's coming from this issue. I mean, because I don't see why that's even but I can see why someone would charge an unreasonable fee if they're the only person offering services in that area. It's almost like they could charge anything they wanted to, but you wouldn't even have that as a problem if we had competition.
Well, I think there are also some ethical sort of concerns, that I would have about some of that, the supply demand capitalistic model, especially with an LMSW, which we could say is probably a newer person to the profession. And then we're saying to them, you can't ever get the LCS, you can't afford it if you live in a rural community. So I do have some sort of, internal things inside of me that says, I never believed that social work is free, okay? And I tell my boss all the time, social work is not free. Social workers are not free.
Yes.
But I do think that there's some other sort of parameters and some value system. And it would seem that it's not, equitable to harm people who are at least able to afford it. So I don't know about the reasonable fee piece, because maybe there needs to be a range or something. And then the BACS can decide whether they want to live with the range. I don't know all the answers to that, but that might be something, but it would provide due hardship. It's just like in law. If you can't afford a good attorney.
Yeah. That's where it's looking like it's going. And I don't agree with that at all. I think we need to have as much access as possible.
Yeah, public
And
defense.
technology allows as much access as possible.
Well, I think they're two separate. I think the E piece over here is somehow, when we think about the option that's in 5, there's no option, I'm sorry, for 5038. There is an option. They have to go before the board. And I remember listening, trying to find a response to something I had submitted, but I could never get through all of the questions about waivers. It's like an hour and a half. And I'm going, where is it? Is there a little? So I think it is requiring a lot of time that could be spent, during other things. So maybe we should, Evan, you're saying that we would have to ask the board about H. Is that what you're suggesting?
Right. So I think if the committee would like to suggest to the board to consider this, then I think we would adopt a motion to ask the board to consider it. That would go on the next board agenda.
Okay.
So I don't think it's really in order in this order of business, but it's something we can do before the end of the meeting. Don't let me forget. Okay.
Will not. Yeah.
It's probably more appropriate under item 10. But don't let me forget, and then we can adopt that. So, but with that understanding, let's go back to E.
Yeah.
And so I think what we're gonna do is eliminate everything after the comma.
The first mutual convenience to the.
Yeah, with understanding that the supervisor's interest should always come first. Yes, you're taking all of that out.
Yeah, I think we remove all of that. To work cooperatively with supervisees to arrange supervision sessions mutually convenient to the BACS and the supervisee.
Perfect. Yeah.
Just generally? Okay,
Usually
I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Did anybody have a problem with F?
No, I don't think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Well, the only concern I have, having just attended a national accreditation meeting and sitting in a focus group with ASWB, so ASWB issues around disparities in licensing. When they talk about best practices, and actually even in the whole definition, it's like, or there's supervision for the particular place, perhaps if it's an agent, agency supervision, and how to work there, which might exclude a big part of licensing exam. So I have some concerns that, sort of the general statements here don't necessarily require supervisors to assist supervisees with content that would help them pass the licensing exam. So, so we had that big discussion about, does it make a good supervisor? I mean, not supervisor, or social workers who don't pass the licensing exam, not as good as those who pass the licensing exam? And does the exam measure capacity to really perform social work duties? So when somebody's supervising someone, because I can remember I supervised in addictions and agencies, and I worked in public schools. I supervised, student people who had social work, who had social work degrees. The supervision was different because of the setting, but that is not today, not necessarily a way that's going to really assist the social workers professionally. So I sort of wonder about that. I don't know if anybody else has concerns about it, but I just want to bring it up. That's something we need to think about a little bit. And since we have all the data from ASWB is showing that 44-year-old to plus African Americans are scoring poorly and failing the test across the country.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any proposed language to add, or, based on that?
I can't think of it now.
Okay.
I'm thinking of moving somebody else.
Okay, no, and we can come,
help with that.
yeah, and we can come back for sure.
Okay, well,
All right, so F, to remain informed, wait, that's one we just did, yeah, sorry. G, to maintain the best interests of the supervisee unless those interests conflict with another duty or responsibility described in this section. Yeah. Okay, and then we get to unreasonable fee.
yeah.
Yeah, look, I understand it's hard, right? Because we can't, for example, set a dollar amount. We can't, everybody's situation is sort of different, which is why, and like I said, I borrowed the language from attorneys, which is always, they litigate that forever. The disciplinary boards can determine what's reasonable and what's unreasonable, et cetera, et cetera. And so I don't know what the answer is. I am concerned about someone not being able to find a supervisor because, they can't afford it, or a supervisor just sort of saying, no, you know what, I'm going to start charging $500 a session. That's not what it is. So I don't know how to fix it, which is why I brought it up, and I wanted
Has that been an issue?
I wouldn't say it's an issue. It's commented on about what social workers charge. And then I also, on the other hand, have people who are wanting to get the BACS. They're wanting to know what they can charge. And it's like, we don't set your.
Yeah, it's like setting practice sessions.
Right.
And it's also up to the supervisee to agree to the charge or not. Some mutually agreed upon charge.
I'm not particularly comfortable with reasonable.
Yeah, I understand. I live in the reasonable world, so it's like another word to me, just with a standard, but I completely understand. And that's been a general theme for both the board and for this committee, is providing additional definitions, so it's less subjective, so I completely understand. The question though is there a way to address it, or does the committee prefer just to remove it?
I don't really see why we would need to put that. I think if anyone's charging some unreasonable fee, then people just wouldn't see them for supervision. But again, I say this in the context of if there's not a person that's without competition.
But should that drive the rule for the development of social workers? And
I don't know,
that's my concern, because I know when I've done private practice, if I still, some people in our community who make lower wages, if I say my pay is $100 an hour, which is really quite low, can't afford that. And this is 45 minutes or 50 minutes or whatever,
Right.
so I'm just, there's something inside. of
Yeah, that wants to
versus-
stay, and at the same time, it's that person's business, it's their business model.
I
It's
got
what
that.
they choose to do, and that supervisee would need to go to another person. Now, if that supervisee maybe found out they had 3 supervisees at one time and they were all getting charged differently or something. Maybe, yeah, I still don't even think then it's our business to meddle in their business in that way.
Well, is this a business model? I just know when I talked to the business school,
Yeah,
the dean of the business school,
yeah,
he would never have thought about this.
right.
Because
Right.
again,
Yeah.
you have if your business is social work and your business then is to make as much money as you can.
And they have to pay their bills. So I'm charging what I
Correct.
need to pay my bills. If the supervisee cannot afford that, they need to go to a different
I got that.
business.
Mhm.
And I don't think that, again, I think the issue, and I think competition does drive business, and that's just our
Yes.
economy. We can't, as social workers, we can't just suddenly be like, oh, we're not in capitalism. I don't like it either, but we're in it, you know? But I also think that online, people not having to pay for a practice so that they can meet in person, pay rent and pay electricity, and that drives up the cost.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I think that
But if our value system has to be with justice as well, social justice, and
sure.
we recognize that a lot of people, especially in Louisiana, are below, the salaries are so low.
Oh, I agree.
They're especially low for women.
Yes,
And
and I
the-
would hope that
and
their
the lower-
employer would even pay for their supervision, and maybe we could talk about that.
Well, that would be a hope, but that's
Yeah.
not a reality. Okay, so
I can't adjust my business for your budget.
Right. And I'm just saying,
Yeah.
is that consistent with social work values as to who gets and who doesn't get services? So that's all I'm saying, that I think that.
As a person
Since
that
we
could not
can't-
afford supervision, I could not afford it, but I made sure I contracted with my employer and I said, you have to pay for this. So there's just ways, and I think we can educate our supervisees on how to get that done. Anytime I have a supervisee, I say, get with your job, see what they can work with me on, every time. So I don't think there are BACS out there that are just like, oh, I'm gonna charge a crazy fee I think that's more of the exception to the rule than the norm.
You could put on a continuing education thing, negotiation for LMSWs.
Yeah, no, that's
How to
really
get
something
what
that
you
needs to be.
deserve. Yeah.
Yeah, and these people that are using us and using our labor, paying us such low salary, we have people, LMSWs, working their butts off for really low salaries, can't afford. That's the issue. That's why you can't afford supervision, not because of my fee.
It may not be, but the fact that I set the fee in this profession, is this if the lawyers have unreasonable?
And their
so-
unreasonable fee is probably wild, though. It's
Well,
probably gonna be.
well, and let me tell you, my
I've seen
understanding-
y'all's costs,
Right.
okay?
$500, what is it?
What's y'all's
My understanding of the way that usually applies, because hourly is sort of based upon, the general, like cost of the locality, right? So a reasonable hourly fee in New Orleans is not the same as one in New York, But it also applies to, for example, unreasonable contingency fees. Like you can't take more than, I think it's now 45% of an award. You also can't, for example, say, I'm going to sign you up for $10,000 flat fee, but then I only work on your thing for 2 hours. It's that kind of a thing. So
Well,
maybe the same,
10,000,
maybe the same issues are not present, and it may very well be that, but I included it just to have the discussion. So
Are we getting complaints?
I don't.
Like a formal complaint?
Yeah, are we getting any complaints stating like this person is trying to charge double my supervision costs now that they have to get a in-person thing or something? Okay.
No, this might have been just me.
And I get
And-
having access for all, I get that. And I also think the virtual, like I said earlier, would eliminate, because there are people that charge $20 a session, go to them. And then there's people, like she said, that are more specialized in the area. They got tons of supervisees wanting their time and attention. So I can't base my fee off the $20 fee, that's for sure.
Yeah, and if it's virtual, I think it would equalize some
Yeah.
of that. So I do agree with that part, because then the person has more options. The LMSW has more options
Right.
because they may not be able to travel. And these might
Exactly.
be the people
And
who
they
have
need that.
young children. It's like, you know, Jennifer was saying, she had to shift herself with young children, health issues, et cetera. And so the same thing with our LMSW supervisees. You know, you have illness and you have all kind of other things that impact,
Yeah.
you know, pay, and maybe you could pay more if you don't have to drive and take off or whatever.
Right.
You know, you have a, so, you know, I think it's a complex sort of issue because, you know, we absolutely deserve to have a fee that's really reasonable. And if you
It's
are
too-
relying on your practice, you know,
Right.
that's your entire
And it's
income.
honestly too blurred of a line of what is reason. And if it's just within the dollars we're talking here, is I don't imagine anyone charging hundreds and thousands of dollars. So
Probably 150 might be something that
Yeah,
some people
probably
might
about that,
charge.
yeah.
And it's up to that person.
It's up to that person.
If
Yeah.
they want to use that hour or pay for that hour.
And their company might be paying that anyway. Those higher exorbitant, they might be them, you know. But I mean, I think we can see inequity everywhere when it comes to social work and who has access to really great therapy or who has really, you know. So
That's true, but I'd rather, if we see it, that we respond in a way that's, again, consistent with the value system of the profession and not just on our personal value systems, which might include, I want to make as much as I can, you know? Because I need to be sure my retirement is all right.
Right. Well, yeah.
I got you. I understand all of that.
Yeah. I like the option for being able to, I don't want to take the option from being able to shop around. That's what I don't want to take from people.
So it sounds like the consensus is we remove H.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, okay.
And if there's like a formal complaint process, if they want to do that or something, or.
Do we have a formal, but there is a complaint like about a social worker, isn't there? Like you can complain, because I know that exists, but is there one for BACS people or is that under that same umbrella?
It's under the same umbrella,
Okay.
the board can accept a complaint against a BACS.
Okay. Okay.
All right, fantastic work, everybody. So I don't know that I was necessarily clear when I was saying we were going to go section by section. So we've gone through one. Thank you all. A1. Thank you all for your thoughtful comments and your work on that. Just in case we aren't missing anything, because I noticed that we hadn't received any comments on A2. I'm going to reopen public comment just in case anyone has any comments on A2. A2 relates to the BACS's duty to the public and to the board, with the understanding that the BACS occupies a dual role of supervising and assisting the supervisee, but also as sort of a gatekeeper and the board's representative in determining whether a particular applicant is qualified. And so for that reason, I'm going to reopen public comment as it relates to A2. So if your hand is raised, I'll recognize you for public comment on A2. And we'll begin with Nita Balcom.
Thank you. I'm not sure how applicable this particular comment is for 2. It really related more to the, advising the supervisee accurately as to, the requirements, et cetera. And I entered in the chat. One issue for accurately advising regarding the rules is that the rules are not updated everywhere in the LABSWE org, the website. And my, for instance, that I gave in the chat was supervised employment is now 3,000 hours. But it's stated accurately in the Practice Act. It's not stated accurately in the rules and standards. So that's just one example of, where the information isn't consistent throughout the different pieces of document that we are expected to be knowledgeable about.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah, and as y'all know how hard we've been working to make sure that we get we get those rules promulgated, and Emily's been really instrumental in that. I know she's been working really hard.
Thank you, Emily.
All right, next we have Will Francis.
Yeah, thank you again, Will Francis, NSW, for the opportunity to comment. While I appreciate the spirit of number 2, to me, it feels slightly like a solution in search of a problem. I would actually remove A through D and just keep it at 2. BACS have a professional duty to report to the general public, ensuring that unqualified social workers do not obtain the LCSW credential. And then I think A through D should be in the training. They should be in continuing education. All of those should be in the actual course that is taken to achieve the BACS. I mean, all of that is important information. I'm just not entirely certain what its place is within the rules, since all of that is the ultimate. I mean, that's all what the BACS does, and that's all part of the training. That's all part of the education you give them. So, again, I'm not opposed to A through D. I would just potentially recommend that doesn't necessarily need to live in the rules and should stay in the training itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Carolyn Reed.
Hello. Actually, I was getting ready to say exactly what Will Francis just did. He said it. He articulated probably better than I would have, but I was going to make the same comment that these are all areas that I know were reviewed in depth with me when I became a BACS many, many years ago, and during our 3 hours that when we have to renew. So I agree with Will Francis that we don't need more A, B, C, and D actually in the rules. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, so that's the last hand that I have raised. Just kidding. All right, here's our board vice chair, Jamie Barney.
Good morning. Can you hear me? I'm sorry, afternoon.
Yes.
Okay.
I am just following up on the comments I just heard. Is that I know that persons are voicing that BACS are familiar and get information on what they're required to do. In A, B, C, and D, is that currently in our rules anywhere? And if so, I'm trying to find it quickly based on those comments, but I don't see that anywhere.
Thank you, Jamie. I do not think they are.
I don't think so either.
No, I think that's
That's what I thought they were going to put in there.
that's an addition.
Yeah.
All right, so next we have Jennifer Hannon.
Hi, can you all hear me all right? Hello?
I can hear you, Jennifer.
I believe, Dr. Barney, that's in the training, but I don't know that that's in the rules currently. I think it's it's certainly in the BACS training that we all have, and in the 3-hour refresher courses that we're required to take every other year. But I don't know that it's in the rules.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's.
Last hand I have raised is Gina Rossi. You're recognized.
I had a quick question. I am confused why this is even being heard in the rules committee when the board is developing a supervision committee, and wouldn't they be better able to focus on this?
All right, thank you for your comment. Anyone else? Gonna pause for just a second to see if anyone else has a hand raised. Jennifer Hannon.
Hi, Evan. Forgive me. Referring to the suggestions in the section previously where you had talked about adding a notation to agree on supervision location at the beginning of the supervisory agreement. And so I think you had mentioned that you wanted to add that in the language, and I just wanted to remind you of that. And I know that's not for this section, but I wanted to remind you about your statement. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good point. I want to ask the committee if that's something y'all want to include or if you want to leave it as is. In E of the previous section, we have to work cooperatively with supervisees to arrange supervision sessions mutually convenient to the BACS and the supervisee. The suggestion was made that to formalize that they have to come to that agreement at the beginning of supervision. And so my question is whether y'all want that language included or you want to leave it as is.
I like at the beginning of supervision. I'd like to add that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we can put to work cooperatively with supervisees at the beginning of supervision to arrange supervision sessions mutually convenient to the BACS and the supervisee. Yeah? Okay, great. So I don't see any additional public comments on subsection A2. And so therefore I'm going to close public comments on A2. Open for discussion.
I mean, are we putting it in is that what we're trying to do, is put it in the rules because it's not in the rules?
That was my sort of approach. Yeah.
Okay. Or we could say like BACS has to adhere to the training. No, is that?
So I don't know that I've never gone through the training.
Oh,
I don't know what the
well,
training
in the
is.
training, it does discuss all of this. And it's pretty much the whole point of us being a supervisor is to determine and help whether or not the social worker becomes a licensed clinical social worker. So that's kind of the whole idea of what we're doing for those 2.5, 3 years.
Sure.
I just wondered from Emily if you have supervisees contacting the board or complaining that they've been evaluated unfairly or somebody said they're not fit for the profession. I like this to some extent only because there are people who assume because they're getting supervised that everything's going to go fine and they're going to finish the supervision. So this sort of spells out for them that, you know, there are some other criteria that the supervisee needs to read as well. So do you get?
I get very few
Very few.
evaluation forms stating that somebody needs to, that somebody is not ready for independent practice.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I think sometimes people are scared to evaluate honestly of what's gonna happen, what repercussions gonna happen. Like litigious, you know.
Sure. And I get concerned too that it may be that after they spent money on supervision, there's an expectation that the person is going to evaluate them so that they can do independent practice. But that it may be early on,
Right.
the person may have concerns
Yeah.
about the fitness. So
That's not a great supervisor then, in my opinion, because if you're just finding out at the end that this isn't a great, after 2-3 years of supervising someone, that they might not be a good fit, it might be something that actually happened toward the end, maybe that needs to be reported. I never had an issue with being honest on my evaluations. But that's something that we talk about in supervision, what concerns we have, and then we work on those concerns. I can't imagine. Obviously we want to make sure that's not happening, but it'd be horrible for our BACS to just let someone in because they're worried that the supervisee is upset by their opinion, you know?
well, it's not just upset by the opinion. It could be they're working somewhere, if it's in the workplace.
Oh, in
and
the
they say
workplace.
they're not fit. Does it mean that they could lose a job? They could.
It does.
But
that's just unethical in general. Like they should not be.
It might be, but the reality is that fewer people, I think, will step out and do what you've done if you think the people are not, especially if they don't have a choice with the supervision. Like if you have a choice, you can decide, I can't supervise you anymore. You might do better with another person.
Yeah.
Here's what my concerns are versus somebody who has to supervise someone in the workplace. And I think Emily probably gets complaints. I mean, there are a lot of folks out there who, in honesty, they're not a lot. I mean, that's
It's not, I mean, I would
That's
say
not-
it's probably less than
It's-
5% of the population of it, but I don't know.
about 5-10%.
Yeah, it's not.
So I maybe in public spaces, it might be more challenging if you work for a public agency and you have to supervise someone as part of your job. I wonder if Jennifer can comment on some of that, or some of the people who are working.
Jennifer has her hand raised again, if y'all would like to hear from her.
Can we hear from Jennifer?
Yeah, sure. So I have discretion to reopen public comment for individual speakers, so I will allow Jennifer to talk again. Welcome back, Jennifer.
Thank you, and thanks for coincidentally thinking I might have a thought on this, Rebecca. I do. You know, I absolutely agree with Katie that when as you know, I've supervised many people, and you know, it's incumbent upon me as a supervisor to own the responsibility of that role. And part of the responsibility is for me to be grown up and mature enough to say when I don't think something is working well. I also think that there should be no surprises. And so if I'm getting to the end of supervision and deciding at that point, oh, I'm going to say this person's not a good fit for, you know, and not ready, then I've really failed that supervising, because my job is to guide them and help them over that 2-year time frame. And if I haven't done so and let them know when I have concerns, then I'm really not doing what I'm obligated to do. So those are my thoughts on that. And that, you know, yes, you are right, Rebecca, that sometimes we have to supervise, but we choose to be BACSs in the first place. And when we choose to go through that training and we choose to take on that responsibility and that designation, we understand that that comes with an additional layer of responsibility. And if we don't feel like we're capable of doing more than just giving glib reassurance, then we ought not be in the position. And so those are my thoughts on that.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Would a person, so somebody who's supervised, if they don't meet the requirements, and I hear Jennifer, because I think the one element that's sort of courage to say what needs to be said. And so would a supervisee, I don't want to say be harmed, but if they were in a public space in the workplace, that they suffer consequences connected to the LCSW, not being able to even sit for the LCSW. That's the only piece I'm sort of concerned about, because the private, you know, with private, you can really decide, you know, but in the public setting, does it impact whether a person is retained or not? I don't know. I'm just asking the question. It may be covered in 2 without all of this other, and that once you inform the supervisee of the responsibilities, which is in that other section that we just talked about, maybe that covers it, maybe it's covered there.
Yeah.
You know, right at the beginning, when you look at your negotiating time, the BACS person is telling their supervisee, here's my responsibility, here are the rules.
The risk.
And yeah, and here's the possibility that in the relationship, we find you're not
Moving along.
or that maybe your strengths are somewhere else. I would, you know, report that to the board. So we may not need this if we have the other to provide knowledge.
Well, up to y'all as to what you want to do with it. I'm of the belief that the more specificity you provide, the better, so that people know specifically what their duties are. But it's the committee's decision.
I am too, actually. That's the only reason I like this.
Yeah, I don't mind this.
People seem shocked if you say, you know, this is, you're struggling with this, and they're like, oh, well, everybody else said I'm wonderful, whatever. So
And if it's not listed anywhere, then needs to be. So.
Yeah, it's not.
If it's not listed anywhere, then, you know, I think it needs to definitely even if the training covers it, it should still be a
Something to be read.
requirement. Yeah, something that is.
In writing
Yeah.
somewhere.
Okay. Any proposed changes or anything to A2?
You said you were changing to candidly evaluate each supervisor, start evaluating the,
Oh, to accurately and candidly evaluate. Oh yeah, I changed that already.
okay, to refuse. I mean, I think, again, if it's not in anywhere else, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we are now moving on to B. A BACS shall not, A, provide incorrect, incomplete, or misleading information to the board in an effort to circumvent any law or this part. B, counsel any supervisee to provide incorrect, incomplete, or misleading information to the board in an effort to circumvent any law or this part. Or C, maintain a relationship with a supervisee that would violate the Practice Act or Chapter 1 of this part. Additional prohibitions. I will now open public comments on subsection B. Please raise your hand if you have any comment as to proposed subsection B. And I will begin with recognizing Carolyn Reed.
Hello again. In this section, I have unfortunately had to do this before, and the board sent me a form. Now, this was many years ago to assist in how this was to be reported. So my question is, does any of that still exist? And if it does it need to be included in this section that what the board will provide to the BACS to assist them?
Are you talking about A2?
No, I'm talking about B.
B, okay, thank you very much.
Now, isn't that what I'm supposed to be talking about?
That's right. I was confused. It's my fault entirely. I apologize.
Okay, but I want to say, because Emily sent me the information many years ago. So I'm wondering if it needs to be addressed in this section, if we're going to keep all this information, what the board will provide to the BACS to assist them with this.
Oh.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Like the rules or something?
So let's close up public comments first. So any additional public comments on subsection B? All right, seeing none, the public comment period is now closed. Okay. Discussion.
I was trying to understand Carolyn's comment. She was meaning like the rules, or the boards would provide some kind of rules or so say that's we can easily disseminate or something, or I don't understand what that means about incorrect, incomplete, or misleading information. I guess to prevent any spreading of incomplete or incorrect information or something. Is that what she's? Could we get her to clarify? I just want to know what form she was.
I don't know.
Okay.
Well, she raised her hand again, so we can.
I believe I sent her something, but I don't know
Mhm.
what it was.
Okay, we'll recognize Carolyn Reed again.
Yes, that was exactly what I was saying.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
I don't know what form she's talking about.
And the intention of this part is to
What is the intention? Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe that would help. Okay.
sure. So the intention is to just provide additional prohibitions that aren't included in like because A, right, is related to the duties to the social worker, to the public. B is like additional prohibitions that didn't necessarily fall in that, but things that we definitely do not want BACS to do. And that includes things like, what I was mostly concerned about is like people not providing correct information if they're trying to seek certain waivers, people not providing correct information as it relates to a supervision record, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I see.
Like, oh yeah, we totally did these supervision sessions of 60 minutes each, and they were there for like 10 minutes. You know?
Yes.
Okay.
That makes sense in that case.
I just don't want it to ever get a hang up that maybe the BACS didn't know it was incorrect or something, and then it falls on the.
So then we can include knowingly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's an easy fix,
Okay,
yeah.
I like that. Okay.
Yeah. and
So rule, what I wanted to look at was chapter 1, the standards of practice.
Yes.
And so 109G5 says a social worker shall accurately complete and submit reports, assessments, evaluations, forms, or similar documentation in a timely manner. This includes all forms requested by the Louisiana State Board of Social Work Examiners. Do we not group supervision with that, or do you think we need to be more specific?
So Emily, are you saying it covers? That it covers?
No, I'm asking, would that cover
This.
that concern?
Yeah.
It's 111, wait, not 109.
Oh,
111G.
I'm
yeah.
sorry, thank you.
All right.
I mean, we have had complaints where a rule wasn't specific enough and we couldn't move forward, so.
Jamie just said more specific,
Yeah.
and she all caps specific.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, assessment.
Oh, I was adding knowingly.
Yeah, that's, it covers that there.
For A and B.
I think it's a good reminder though, to have it there, to be specific about this.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. I like specificity. And specifically in this, because we also like rules, to like be as self-contained as possible.
Right.
Because it gets confusing if you have to look at a rule that defines a certain thing, but then you also have to go find a bunch of other things in the other rules, that would be kind of my view on that. So what I've done is I added knowingly to the beginning of A and B. I guess it applies to C as well, even though, we.
Probably too.
So instead of adding it to all three, can you say a BACS shall not knowingly?
Oh, much
dot,
better.
dot?
Much better, Emily. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually put that.
Yeah, and it's fine, I'm saying let's move.
Okay, great. Anything else on this one? All right, then let's move to C. Yeah, we'll do D separately. C is all technical and kind of grammatical, not grammatical, but all like technical changes. Nothing really in here. The substance has not changed, but I'm happy to open public comments on this. So we'll open public comments on subsection C. Again, there's not any substance that has been changed.
Right.
So public comments are now open. Please raise your hand if you would like to address the committee on C. Thank you, good time. Well, I figured this was going to be a lot, so.
We have a comment when public comments are over.
Okay. I see no hands raised, so just kidding. Nita Baucom, you are recognized for public comment on subsection C.
The one comment that's come up in conversation with the various presentations I've done is the language for, I've already lost the letter of the item. Item 3, submitted 2 letters of reference to the board from other professionals, one of whom should be an LCSW. The should be, as I have understood it, is required to be. And so if that's not, if I have been given an inaccurate understanding, then great. But I have been given to understand that it's not like a should in many people's minds indicates that would be a good thing as opposed to required.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. That's absolutely right. We should not use the word should unless it's actually discretionary. So that is a good point. I have changed it from should to must. Very good comment. Thank you, Nita.
Wait, where is it at?
C3 should exist in the existing rule.
Okay.
Yeah.
Must.
Okay. Any other public comments on C? Okay, public comment period is now closed. Open for discussion. Oh, wait, Nita came in once more. I will allow Nita Baucom to talk again.
My apologies. I don't know why I didn't pop it right out. But the only other thought I had with this is at some point I was advised by the staff at LABSWE that a person could begin the application process for the BACS at any point post receiving the LCSW. However, in fairly recent years, it seems like what I'm hearing from people is because they took, let's say, the 6.5 hour training 2 years ago, they can't use that now. It's not current enough. And so I think that becomes confusing. At what point can one initiate the application?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's something we can address as well. I have additional hands raised now, and I will recognize Will Francis.
Yeah, just one. Will Francis just wanted the very last one, supervise at least one supervisee every 3 years. I understand the spirit of that. My concern is maybe someone has been 2 years off, was planning on doing it, and then ran into a health issue or something. So I'd maybe include language that says supervise at least one supervisee every 3 years, unless maybe obtaining a board approval or waiver or just something to allow for someone maybe who's in a unique circumstance not to lose their BACS because of some type of health issue or some type of other issue, which maybe came up later in the process. I would just love just to make sure there's an out there so it's not a complete black and white removal of that person.
Thank you. So we're not there yet, but we will save that comment for next time. I anticipated that D was going to have a lot more discussion. So just everybody, we're on C right now. You're going to have an opportunity to comment on D, particularly D4. So the current discussion right now is on C, subsection C. I have Jennifer Hannon, who is recognized.
Hi, yes, I thought the caller made an excellent point, the caller right before Will, because I don't think it's clear in the language how, when someone is allowed to initiate getting their BACS for the first time. And I do think there ought to be some language somewhere to address that so there isn't confusion, because we certainly know that there used to be confusion about needing retrainings, and that's why they started why there were meetings about it, and they started pushing out the BACS trainings, and everyone gained greater understanding that it was to be every other year. So I think that this is an opportunity to provide clarity, and I'm really glad the caller brought up that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Right, last one, Board Vice Chair Dr. Jamie Barney.
Greetings. I also agree with the need for a time frame within which the board orientation workshop and the board approved supervision workshop should take place before the LCSW gets the BACS designation, that it should be done within 6 months of the application or a year or whatever the committee sees fit. But I do like the idea of having some time frame put in.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Barney. All right, last call for public comments on subsection C. I will wait. And, okay, public comments are now closed on this subsection. General discussion. So I think that adding the limitation is probably a good idea. The question is just how long? Yeah. So, and that's the board orientation workshop or the board approved supervision workshop? Which one was both? Okay.
Both, yeah.
Okay,
That was what I was gonna bring to the
Okay.
table.
yeah.
Because we get that question, and I'm more comfortable with the 6.5 hour workshop being a little older, because
It's not given as,
the topics that are discussed probably don't change that much within a few years of each other. But the board orientation workshop changes as the board has changes. So I think that needs to be more like
Recent.
closer to
Yeah.
the time that you apply.
okay.
I don't know if that makes it more difficult though, to put two different timelines on it.
I don't think so. I think it makes sense. Kind of like ethics. The ethics CU is every other. This could be something like that.
No, you just, as long as you plan ahead.
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem with, so what are y'all thinking? 6 months, 12 months?
Oof. I mean, I guess it would make sense for, because what we have to do the 6.5, that's just the intro. I mean, which one is just the orientation one? That you don't have to keep.
Number 4, complete the board orientation workshop within how many, within 6 months?
I
Emily?
think 6 months.
Okay.
For board orientation?
So it could be 6 months past and well, you can't even get it. Can you even get that if you applied? Can you go to that workshop if you didn't apply for your license? Yeah.
I think you-
No,
well,
well, I would say 6, I don't know how to word this correctly, but what I wouldn't want is more than 6 months from when you're eligible to get the BACS. So you have to have so many years of experience at the LBW.
Yeah.
So when you're getting close to that, I think it's 3 years. When you're getting close to that 3 years being up, 6 months from that, whatever
Yes.
that date would be.
So 6 months from eligibility, prior to eligibility, and then 6 months post application. I know you can't even apply for it unless you have the stuff.
yeah.
Some people start applying for it, but before the 3 years, but we can't approve it until they've met the 3 years, which I wish they didn't apply till that they've met everything, because they kind of end up sometimes getting lost in the sea of stuff, because it comes in and we can't approve it, so you put it to the side, and yeah.
It also appears that some people are concerned about space limitations.
Yeah,
So
that is
people-
an issue. That's a big
people
issue.
are taking it way sooner than they should. So this is language I've proposed. 4, complete a board orientation workshop no sooner than 6 months prior to eligibility under this subsection. Is that what we were saying? We want it to be 6 months prior to when you officially become eligible.
And I'm kind of a little worried about this little issue with not being able to get into the class, because they only offered so many.
Yeah, the board orientation is every other month.
Okay.
12 people every other month.
12 people every other month. So if you don't get in it, those 12.
But so I think that what was raised as it relates to the like space limitation was that it's because
People are taking it too early?
right when they become LCSWs, they take it, you know, even with the understanding they won't be eligible for another 3 years. So if you put the no sooner than, then that might sort of fix that issue.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Mhm. No sooner than 6 months before.
For eligibility.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, that would make sense, because I don't know why.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the board approved supervision workshop. What's the thoughts on that?
Year?
I think they have a lot less of those offered.
Yeah, those are
Um,
offered.
Yeah, so they definitely need more time, more
Yeah.
time. Do y'all think a year is reasonable? Reasonable?
Mm-hmm.
There's that word.
Mm-hmm. I'm about to go back to 4. So you're saying 6 months prior to eligibility and then up to 6 months after upon eligibility, or just 6 months prior?
So like, because there's a situation where you become eligible, but you like don't want to do it. You
Yeah.
decide into like year 6 that like, oh, I want to be a BACS now.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's
So
just
we're not talking about, yeah.
no, it's just putting the
Okay.
front end limitation on it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Actually, we do have the back end
Yeah.
too,
Oh, what? Huh?
where
In here?
where they take it
2 years ago, then they never,
and then they don't apply for it.
and then they apply much later, because they're like, oh, okay,
I see.
because I think that's what the
Actually,
issue.
both ends.
Yeah, that's what one of the commenters said. They had someone from 2 years ago that took it, and then they decided that they wanted to apply for the BACS.
Yeah.
Does it have an expiration date, basically, I think is what we're.
Okay. So it would have to be no sooner than 6 months prior to eligibility under this subsection and no sooner than date prior to application.
Because it sounds like we're saying 6 months, put in 6 months before eligibility
So you
and an actual.
Yeah, so
Right.
you could fix that by changing eligibility to application, and that way you include it all together.
Okay.
So yeah, no sooner than 6 months, because you could take it at year 2.5 and then apply at year 3, and that's still,
It goes in there.
yeah, okay.
And if you waited after that 3 then it doesn't count anymore, you have to retake it.
Yeah.
So if it's in year 4, then the person has to take the board orientation workshop again, because things do change, so they need to know that. And the supervision is a longer time, right?
Right.
Okay,
So
application, okay.
so you're so essentially with this, you're making the board orientation workshop expire after 6 months.
I don't know about that.
Right, that's the thing.
That's too short. That's not. I just think because things just come up, and I'm not going to punish someone for doing stuff early either, but this,
Right.
I think a year maybe.
So you have the competing issue, right, of not wanting people taking it too early because they take up spots for others, but at the same time wanting to have a longer expiration date.
Yeah, because I don't see things changing that much within the year. That they would need this 6 month, they got 6 months and 2 days in, that they would need another workshop within the same calendar year is wild. So I would at least say a calendar year. Something like that.
And we're okay with people not being eligible for another year, still taking it then? Because you can set 2 different time limits, it just.
Yeah, I was saying two like different. I'm sorry.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was saying 6 months and then 12 months after taking the orientation itself only lasts 12 months from the date you take it or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is what I have for this. 4, complete a board orientation workshop no sooner than 6 months prior to eligibility under this subsection and no sooner than 1 year prior to application.
Is that saying? For some reason, saying no sooner on both of them just makes me think you're saying the same thing. So I know you're not, but.
No, so you can't take it earlier than 6 months before you're eligible. And you can't take it earlier than 1 year before your application.
Isn't that saying the same thing, just changing the time?
Yeah.
Oh, I was meaning more so you wouldn't have to retake it. You wouldn't have to retake it within a year of taking it.
So you could take it up to 6 months prior to being eligible.
Mm-hmm.
And the training credit may only be applied up to 12 months after completion.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it says the same thing. No, that's fine.
Hear it.
Yeah.
That's a different kind of language you're using.
No, that's fine. Look, we can make it clearer. So
Might be using some Shakespearean stuff.
complete a board orientation workshop. Because this is what we want to do, right? We want to prevent people from taking it
Too
more
early.
than 6 months prior to eligibility and more than 1 year prior to application.
Right, so that would take care of the application.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. I see what you're saying.
Because you said it the third time, I finally.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
I
Finally
I
understood.
can change it to more than rather than sooner than.
Maybe.
Okay. No, more than 6 months prior to eligibility under this subsection and no more than 1 year prior to application.
Oh, yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah. It makes a little bit more sense to me.
All right, so now 5, we want to do the same thing as it relates to the board approved supervision workshop.
What was that, the 12 months?
Can we have it 12 months both ways?
Yeah, that's how I have it
Okay.
written, because that's what y'all said.
Because I'm
So- So this now reads 5, complete a board approved supervision workshop on the theory and techniques of supervision, as well as procedures used in supervision toward licensure, no more than 1 year prior to eligibility under this subsection, and I need to put 1 year prior to application. Oops. Okay. All right, anything else on C? Okay, moving on. This one's gonna be, people are gonna have some stuff to say about this. All right, D, to maintain the BACS designation in good standing, the hands are already coming up. The social worker must, oh, sorry, where did it go? 1, maintain LCSW licensure. 2, appropriately conduct all supervisory duties described in this chapter. Ooh, there should not be an and here. 3, complete 3 clock hours of continuing education in clinical supervision every 2 years, beginning July 1st, 2008. We can probably get rid of that. That's been a long time.
Remember when we when we were working on the continuing education section, how we changed the ethics to make it more clear? Like, I think I would want to use the same language we used for that with this.
Like when the collection periods happen. Okay,
Yeah,
let me
because people get confused about this one too.
All right, let me see if I can find that. But I think we said like it begins or ends in even or odd numbered
I think
years.
it's even numbered years, but I didn't.
That's fine. I know I have it in here somewhere. All right, screen sharing is paused. All right. Oh, look, I had it pulled up. Hang on. The big set that we adopted at the last meeting.
Yes.
I have it pulled up. Let me see. Oh, it's in new chapter 11. Here we go. Okay. The 2-year collection period for ethics, continuing education hours, and clinical supervision training hours required to maintain BACS designation ends in even numbered years with the close of the continuing education period. Social workers must complete these hours during the 2 years preceding the close of this collection period to be in compliance. So we included the BACS one in there too, but we are of course free to add that into section 507 as well for clarity.
I think we should.
All right, let's do it. I'm just copying and pasting that. C, well, that's in C. All right, screen sharing is back. So I'm just gonna see what happens when I copy and paste.
Oh gosh, I had the hardest time with copying and pasting. Okay.
I'm gonna delete the superfluous language. Okay, so now it says complete 3 clock hours of continuing education and clinical supervision every 2 years, beginning July 1st, 2008. I feel like we can get rid of that.
Mm-hmm.
These hours must be pre-approved by a LABSWE designated approval organization. This is the new language. The 2-year collection period for clinical supervision training hours ends in even numbered years with the close of the continuing education collection period. Social workers must complete these hours during the 2 years preceding the close of this collection period to be in compliance. That is what this committee and the board adopted for continuing education. So you essentially got to do it, odd to even, like a congressional election cycle.
I have another recommended change.
Okay.
That the hours must be provided. Basically, let me tell you what I want.
Mm-hmm.
I want any provider to be that we would normally accept continuing education from, that we would accept it for this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to just be, these hours must be pre-approved by a LABSWE designated approval organization, because some people don't have to get their stuff pre-approved.
Mm-hmm.
Like ASWB, for example, offers a clinical supervision training, but they're not one of our pre-approval organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, so just.
So you think we just delete it?
I mean, I feel like if it's by anyone that we would normally accept,
Mm-hmm.
that it should count. By a LABSWE designated approval organization. These hours must be pre-approved or provided by a LABSWE. No, I won't say.
Oh,
By an entity. I don't know.
So Jamie put some language. Jamie suggested by an entity with authority to approve CEs in accordance with ...
Yeah. Right to say.
Or to provide, an entity approved to provide. continuing education.
Approved by an entity approved to provide continuing education.
And I've had people like take hours from like, an NASW Texas chapter approved. That should count, that should count.
So I'll put, but under by an entity approved to provide continuing education under the Practice Act or this part, or just no, or just by itself.
Read it one more time.
Yeah, so it's just saying like by the law or the rules, like
Okay.
these hours must be pre-approved by an entity approved to provide continuing education. Well, no, that's not really that. That's not really that because we don't have like a rule to that effect, right? It's just something the board does, right? We don't have a rule that says you have to accept CSWE, not CSWE, ASWB.
Oh, ASWB.
More coffee. ASWB. We don't have a rule that says that. We just do it, right?
I think it's in there
Yeah.
for the approval of sites and stuff. It's in there.
Educational offering
Yeah.
sponsored by or offered by entities
Yeah.
approved by the
Yeah,
association.
to get approved, you have to look at those rules and see how you fit in. And yeah, there's a big process for it.
Right. Then under.
Like I just would like it referenced. If
Yeah,
it's approved by that section.
For this, yes.
Separate.
Oh, we can go to the specific section.
Yeah.
Approved by
it's
the
in there.
Practice Act or section. Which one is it? Oh, the new section.
Yeah.
That's fine. I got the new section right here.
It's 1105.
Oh, great. Okay. Section 1105. Great.
This gives people, I understand what the Rules Committee at that time was trying to do. They wanted to make sure that it was quality workshops
Yeah.
these people were completing. But then at the same time, then it limits people from what they can take. And there are others that are good out there.
Yeah.
So this broadens it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good change. And then 4, supervise at least one supervisee every 3 years. I'm going to open public comment. Recall that we got a public comment from Will Francis who suggested like an exception or a way to apply to the board for a waiver or something like that. So we're going to start now. I have Carolyn Reed, who is now recognized.
I'm just commenting left and right, aren't I?
And we're happy to hear it. Thank you.
I have a problem with 4, of course, and I will give an example. Those of us that are BACS that live in very small communities, we may not have anyone request us for 3 years. And in fact, I experienced that, so I gave up the BACS, not realizing I would have to start all over again when someone did request supervision, which I did. I went ahead and did, went through all the approval and all the workshops, etc. So I think that, like Will said, if you're just 100% that we need 4, we need some language to acknowledge that there could be extenuating circumstances such as what I just said. Also, the way this reads is it almost sounds like as an LCSW, if I don't practice for 3 years, you're going to take my license away. I mean,
Oh, I'm not going to do that. We don't want to do that.
but that's kind of how that wording comes across, sir. And I get it. I do understand that there are BACS that never see anybody. But as I said, in a small community, it's very common that you do not have anyone approach you for 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and since you can't do virtual, and since you can't not do virtual right now, you can't say, oh, well, I know they're having a problem, say, for example, in New Orleans, so I would be glad to do that virtually. So it's kind of setting us up for having to constantly renew our BACS. Thank you.
Very much.
I think she means reapply for the BACS, but
Yeah. Okay.
So one of the problems we have seen is BACS that haven't supervised in a while, and they get that request and they don't understand the stuff that's covered in the board orientation workshop. And there's no requirement to retake that board orientation workshop. So to me, that's more the issue than
that makes sense.
We got like 7 more people,
Oh,
so let's do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
No, it's all right. No, it's all right. Yeah, we got everybody's here. Okay, Jennifer. Oh, recognize Jennifer Hannon.
Love that, actually.
Hi, everybody. I for me, the bigger concern here is that we already know that there are not enough BACS to provide the supervision to folks, and that folks struggle to find a supervisor. And I hate to see something put in that is going to further reduce, in my estimation, reduce the number of available supervisors. And for example, for me, as I was saying earlier in this meeting, I was super flexible when I could be with my supervision. Now the supervision that I offer is much more restrictive. LDH hasn't reached out to me in 2 years, two and a half years since my last supervisee left to go do her PhD. So LDH hasn't asked me to supervise. They may again soon, but right now it's a hit or miss because of my limited flexibility. And of course, that's going to change in a couple more years when I have more flexibility because of my kiddo situation. But I just worry about how this may impact the supervisees and their ability to get supervision.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, next we have Gina Rossi, who's recognized.
Thank you. I wanted to point out, and Carolyn did this too, that there are BACS who are willing to be BACS and would seek out the opportunity to do this, but they may not have that opportunity. I know this goes back to virtual supervision, but it does. They might be willing to do it virtually, but because the persons have not been approved by the waiver process, that knocks them out. And maybe for three years, which is nothing, it's 36 months, they're not able to see somebody face to face, but they would have been willing to do the supervision virtually. And I'm not in agreement with it being a waiver process. I'm not in agreement with that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Board Vice Chair Dr. Jamie Barney, who is recognized.
Greetings again. I wanted to have a clarifying question, but first I want to say that I do completely support putting this time frame on, because we've seen issue with supervisees losing hours and losing time because there was some step that was not taken, that if they had a BAC that was more aware or had an opportunity to be more updated on what the current requirements were, then we wouldn't necessarily have to revisit those situations and see, what we need to do to help the supervisee, or if we can help the supervisee claim those hours. So I do believe that if a BAC has not provided clinical supervision in a time frame that whatever this committee decides, I support that they should, go through that orientation process again and make sure they understand what's required of them, since things do change. The clarifying question I had was, if the person, I see it's one person every 3 years. So is that saying if I completed supervision with someone in 2024 then I don't have to touch anyone else for 25, 26, until 27. And if so, that makes more sense. But is this saying, I have to have started supervision within the past 3 years with someone? Because, that's two different things. And I might be overthinking it a little bit, but I just wanted some clarity on that, because I do think that could be a little excessive, that I would have to start someone, because I am a BACS too, so I get it, that I would have to start someone within every 3-year period. Or is that saying I have to have provided supervision at least once within the past 3 years? Because as a BACS who has been active, I get a lot of people approaching me for supervision because they can't find anyone. But then there's organizations, large organizations with a multitude of BACS that haven't provided supervision for years. And so I do not understand why they would maintain that designation. And I do think that if they're not available and it's not an option, then they shouldn't necessarily be advertising themselves as such within their credentials.
Thank you, Jamie. I actually had that thought in the car on the way over here that wasn't specific enough. So I definitely think that we can discuss that if y'all actually want to keep this in, because yeah, it doesn't make sense. Like, is it starting or is it? And the way that I envisioned it was at some point be supervising, but the language is not clear. Will Francis is recognized next.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Apologize for jumping the gun earlier. I had trouble seeing that D up there. I know I mentioned a waiver after sort of listening and thinking. I'm leaning, against having this. I think my larger concern is that, if we're going to base these rules on social work values, and if we're really going to have a foundation in social work, then even the BACS has the right to self-determination when it comes to how they provide their trainings. So rather than again, as has been said, removing that, maybe a board orientation after 3 years, I understand. And, just to throw a monkey wrench in there, all it does is say supervise. I could have someone come to me, I could start the supervision, we could go through it for a week, they could determine that we don't fit and they leave, and then I've done my thing. So again, I worry about, in instances like that, trying to over litigate to get to that situation, or at least understanding that if that happens, you cannot get rid of that person because they would have supervised that person for a period of time. So I worry a little bit about this, but I pull back on the waiver piece and would support the board orientation should it go. But overall, I think ultimately it's the BACS decision to determine whether or not they do or don't supervise. We don't take away people's licenses, whether they do or don't drive, and in certain other areas, once getting that distinction, they've got it. So thank you for allowing me to comment.
Thank you. Next, I'll recognize Brandon Reeves. Brandon Reeves, you need to unmute yourself, please. Last call for Brandon Reeves. Okay, hand is gone. Next, Danita LeBlanc, you are recognized.
Thank you. I share Jennifer's concern about we already don't have enough BACS in enough areas, and that it will, I think, decrease the overall BACS pool. I have no problem with retaking the board orientation and with the changes that have consistently happened, especially with the new platforms or the current platform and the to-be new platform. I think that probably needs to be in place, but there's no opportunity for the self-determination. There's no opportunity for it doesn't fit in my life. We are traveling now, and if I can't do virtual, then I'm not doing supervision because that's going to penalize anybody I supervise. And that's another issue to be dealt with later. And I understand that, but it's a limiting factor on me accepting supervisees as a BACS. And I really do have a problem. It almost sounds like with this, if supervision takes 3 years and you have to supervise at least one person every 3 years, then you must be always supervising.
It does sound.
Is the way I'm reading it.
I didn't intend it that way, but I understand. Thank you. Okay. Next, Gina Lewis is recognized.
Hi, yeah, my comment supports Will Francis and Danita's comments. I would be in support of a new board orientation every 3 years if you have to supervise, but I would stop short of forcing a person to supervise every 3 years just because, as Will said, it's about self-care and self-determination. And there are all kinds of instances that we could think of where a person could not be available for 3 years. They could be working on their doctorate and not able to take on a person. And then it would be a burden on them to have to go back and reapply and get all those other things done to be able to be a BACS again. So I would be really against adding that supervision of at least one person every 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Next, we have lower hand. Next, we have Jennifer Hannon, who is recognized.
Thank you, Evan. Yes, I also agree with the point that a number of folks have made about self-determination. I think that's really important. I think that it certainly comes across as punitive otherwise, and that's concerning to me. If the broader issue is the fact that a BACS may not be updated on the latest changes for format, et cetera, then I think every BACS would be happy to retake the larger class, the training, every so many years. And if that's the bigger issue, then I think the better way to do this is to address that directly by putting that requirement rather than saying that someone can lose their BACS designation if they're not supervising in a certain time frame. Thank you.
Jennifer. Now recognize Nita Balcom.
So my concern at this moment is I don't understand the need for it whatsoever. That particular item. I think any number of the other people have made points regarding how that can get generalized to other areas that make no sense whatsoever if you are choosing not to practice LCSW license, then I'm going to have that removed from me. I don't understand if it's considered for the BACS, why wouldn't it get generalized to all these other areas that make no sense whatsoever? I think the other piece we're talking about, now asking people to take another course, a course that's already very limited in when it gets offered and how many people can access that. I think that's probably less than 24 who can access that on a yearly basis, but now you're expecting additional people to have to access. I think that if there's concerns about, is this BACS person up to date? There are other ways to provide the information regarding, what the forms are, what the et cetera, et cetera. We got essentially no training whatsoever in CERTME, but we somehow managed to, be okay with that. So yeah, I'm finding myself flustered to even share this, my thoughts about this, because it's just, it makes no sense to me. Why would we need to remove designations? Why would we need to impose additional resource allocation? Why would we look to decrease access? I don't understand.
Right, thank you. The last hand I have raised is from Brandon Reeves, who is now recognized.
Let's try this again.
Got it this time.
It was a setting in my phone that I had to go do and it kicked me out. So I'm going to echo what a lot of people said, that my thought initially was that if this is a refresher training issue, that policies, procedures, systems may have changed, then perhaps we could offer some sort of a board orientation workshop, either, and it may not have to be the full initial one. There may be certain pieces that are more important that could even be done pre-recorded and accessible via the internet, via the website, or the board orientation workshop, maybe for those who have supervised in the past, could be offered via Zoom access. And I also wanted to add the caveat that that is only applicable in my mind as long as the every 2 years education is up to date and compliant, of course, because if it's only for Louisiana systems and policies that need to be updated, then we should be able to find a way to do that. But short of taking away a designation, and I understand the designation is not a license, and there would have to be a different way if you want to. I mean, it's just a designation. However, it is a designation that many of us have, and it does signify that we have completed not only the education classes to become a board-approved supervisor, but you've also had evidence of your clinical maturity. Maybe the only way I know how to say it, your expertise, your ethics, that's been attributed to by 2 other professionals and accepted by the board. So that designation, even if you're not supervising someone, still means something to people.
Thank you very much. We'll hold open the public comment period for just a moment longer to make sure if anyone else would like to provide their comments on this issue. All right, Jennifer Hannon again.
Thank you. Okay. I think this is my last comment on this. I do see this as something that's undeniably intertwined with remote supervision allowances, and I think that if we had that, it wouldn't solve every single problem, of course, and there would need to be some updates that you've already noted are important, but I think it would solve a lot of the issues. And so, and I think that having the remote supervision will certainly make it much more manageable for both supervisees and supervisors. And I think you would get more frequent access to supervisors. And I wanted to make that point as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, this is the last call for public comment on, where am I? D, on subsection D, right. Last call for public comments on subsection D. All right, Gina Lewis.
I just have a question about what kind of a timeline will we expect to hear the decision making on this, or how does this, would this have to be promulgated, or how far do we have to go to add this to the rule?
So thank you for the question. This is a rule proposal just like every other, so it goes through the normal process of being considered by this committee, then being considered by the board, and then going through the promulgation process. Nita Balcom, again.
Yeah, my apologies. I'm not sure where this question is most appropriate. There is an opportunity for an LMSW to request a waiver. There's no opportunity for a BACS supervisor to request a waiver for, virtual, et cetera, et cetera. I'm in an elder social worker cohort. I've seen family and friends pass away from communicable diseases, et cetera. I restrict myself in terms of how much I go out, et cetera. But there's not really that kind of a option for me to be able to do virtual supervision because of my own health concerns or my own risk for what in-person supervision means, et cetera. So again, not sure where that comment was most appropriate. I appreciate you letting me say it.
Thank you. All right, we have one left, and this is from Michelle Guidry, who is now recognized.
Yes, sir. I just want to echo Ms. Nita's concerns about the BACS being able to request a waiver. I am currently in a situation where I may need an additional surgery and would love to be able to provide the supervision, have the training, have the license, but would like the flexibility of either offering remote or in person, because I do have a private practice and I do have an office, but there's not the option for me to do that at the moment. So I would like for the board to, or the committee rather, to consider that. That's all I got.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to remind everybody that public comment is limited to what's being under consideration. The opportunity for a BACS to request a waiver is under a completely different rule. So I'm going to ask if you have comments on that you please do not give them at this time, because that's not what the committee is currently considering. Also, if you've already provided public comment, I'm going to ask you to please refrain. I'm trying to be respectful and allowing everyone to talk, but we are getting toward the end of our time and we need to make sure that we can act. With that understanding, is there anyone else who would like to give public comment on this item, which is subsection D? Okay, with that understanding, then the public comment period is now closed. Let me just provide background before we discuss. I sort of have a feeling that what y'all are going to say. But the reason that I put this was kind of multifaceted. And the first one was, I know as a board, we've been seeing a lot of circumstances with people who hold the BACS designation but are not supervising. There's been a lot of people who have been, from what I understand, people who are complaining that they can't find supervisors. And look, I understand we regularly grant waivers when it comes to travel time. You know, we kind of understand the importance of being able to find your supervisor. And if they live in Bunkie and you live in, you know, Caring Crow, like that's an important thing as it relates to travel time. The thing about self-determination, I understand. I can tell you that when I drafted this, it was from the standpoint that a BACS is sort of a designation in service to the profession rather than a designation that one receives sort of for their own benefit. That might not be the way that people see it, but that's kind of the way that I approached it. Which is that the BACS is sort of in service to the profession rather than in service to the person's credential. The BACS is correctly identified that the BACS is a designation, not a credential. And so it would be completely improper to remove someone's credential if they had not been practicing, as long as they maintain their other requirements. But I could understand the designation. And then finally, just to sort of point out as well, new subsection G, and I'll show that to everybody here. To reinstate a BACS designation, the social worker must, 1, complete 3 hours of continuing education, 2, complete a board orientation workshop, and 3, complete all conditions required by the board for reinstatement. So a lot of what everybody was saying, which was like do another board orientation workshop, that is essentially what exists now, right? Yeah. So look, it's not intended to be punitive in any way. It's not coming from a position of assuming that BACS are, you know, unethical or lazy or anything like that. It's just sort of based upon some concerns that we've seen. And obviously, you know, we're going to do what the committee intends and recommend to the board. But I just wanted to be able to explain, you know,
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, I don't understand exactly what the problems are being created if those, I understand you're saying the duty to the profession. Yeah, there's a duty to the profession that does not come above your own needs. I mean, or your personal needs. And I don't think we need to track that. I don't think we need to create more work for the board to approve someone to not do supervision for 3 years or something like, or it just seems like more work when we could just not have it at all. Because I don't know who's complaining. Are people saying, "Hey, this supervisee, it's been 3 years. It's not fair, and I really want them to be my supervisor." Like, what?
Well, I know that there's situations where when there's a shortage of BACS or people can't find supervisors, I know people bring up the fact, well, there are people who are BACS who just don't supervise anymore.
Yes,
That's all.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And I'm just trying to figure out what that has to do with. I mean, that doesn't get rid of the reasons why BACS aren't supervising. it just, you're probably causing even more people to drop out of supervising, putting more so I just don't see the point of the item at all. Especially since the workshop is required for us to take to keep every couple of years, we have to take it. So it's not, I liked the thought of making sure we know the rules and stuff, but in order to even keep it, you have to take that orientation workshop every 2 years with Gina, right?
No,
That's what I do.
you have to. You have to take the 3 hours in clinical supervision.
So you're saying I don't have to take that orientation with Gina ever again?
Unless you let your BACS lapse and you need to reinstate it.
Oh, no.
I thought we had it. I've taken it twice with her, and I've only had it for a few years. I thought we had to take it every other year, like ethics.
You have to take 3 hours in clinical supervision. The orientation workshop isn't considered clinical.
I just thought that was required where did I get that information from? And why did she let me go to class again?
Well, some people want to take it. We don't question somebody.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with,
I know there's nothing wrong. I just thought it was a requirement this whole time.
but I think the purpose of this, it says to maintain the designation in good standing. And that's what the focus is on this, because we've had a lot of good feedback and discussion. It seems that the supervision, at least one every 3 years, is something we want to delete, it seems to me, and instead that the person have the board orientation, because things change.
Okay, yeah.
So to me, that would be more applicable. And I have to say, some of the people who commented about waiver, it may be that there's another issue here underneath to maintain the designation in good standing. It seems as though there has to be something in this maintaining good standing that allows for options in supervision or something. So I appreciate the comments, made by those who are saying, for whatever reason, health related, whatever, I want to stay in good standing. I'll go to the board orientation workshop, every 3 years, but again, it goes back to some of that face-to-face piece, and whether it's left up to the supervisee to request the waiver when the issue comes and is generated from the BACS person. So to me, it is a designation, good standing sort of issue, but I don't know right now how to state it, because we've been talking about it for such a long time at the moment.
So, and on that note, it is 3:54, and we do have a hard stop according to the agenda at 4 p.m. So my recommendation is going to be that we defer this to the next meeting so we can keep talking about it. Also, so that now that it's been out and people are aware of the draft that we're considering, we can receive more input next meeting. But I wanted to make sure we were able to do 2 things before we left. The first of which is if y'all wanted to adopt a motion to ask the board to revisit 503H regarding remote supervision. So without objection, we will defer the current agenda item to next meeting to continue discussion based upon the draft in progress. And without objection, we will advance to item 10 on the agenda, consideration of other matters that may come before the committee. All right, so I will entertain a motion at this time. What is the motion?
I was going to talk about adopt the motion to request the merger. So I talk about it.
Yeah.
We're not on that one yet, though?
Yeah, that's what we moved to. We moved to 10 so that y'all could make the motion to ask the board to consider instructing us to amend the rules to allow for 100% remote supervision.
Yes.
Okay, I stated the motion. So who would like to make the motion? Okay, it's been motioned by Ms. Doty. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Dr. Chasson. Any public comment on this motion? Seeing none, public comment is now closed. Any objections to the motion? Any objections? Hearing no objection, the motion is adopted. Okay, and then the last We'll advance to item 11, scheduling the next meeting of the committee. We don't want to let this sit too long, so everyone take your calendars out. Where's my phone? Here it is. Everyone take your calendars out and all right, so what do we, how we think about the beginning of December? Maybe the week of the 4th? Not on Monday the 4th, because that would be the Monday after a board meeting and Emily's always incredibly busy. The week of the 4th or the week of the 11th?
I can pull off the 5th or the 7th on the week of the 4th.
Okay. The 7th looks good to me. Anybody comments on that?
7th is good for me.
Okay.
7th is good.
All right, so we all want to do a morning 10 o'clock or an afternoon 1 o'clock?
I prefer morning.
Okay. December 7th, 10 a.m. Any problems, any comments on that? All right, that will be our next meeting, December 7th at 10 a.m. here. And then do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. D'Angelo, is there a second? Second by Ms. Doty. No public comments. Thank you all. There's been, we started the meeting with 35 attendees, then it got to like 55, and now it's back down to 30 something. So thank you all for attending and for your thoughtful comments. We will see you again in the Rules Committee on December 7th at 10 a.m. Have a great, Thanksgiving, because we won't see you until after that. All right, everybody take care. Goodbye now. All right. I will end the meeting. Ending the meeting.
Recording.